Hello and welcome to How to D&D More Good with me, Dread Roberts. Today we're going to talk about 5 tips in how to engage your players a little bit better. As we know, not all players are the same. Some players are more vocal than others, some take notes obsessively, some don't take notes at all. For some, D&D is the highlight of their week, and for some, D&D is just a casual bit of a game they like to do just to break up the week and break up their social time. So not every player is the same, but as a dungeon master we have a responsibility to at least try to engage all players equally. Sometimes that can be quite difficult indeed. So some of these are tips that I actively put in my games. Some of these are tips I've gained from watching other dungeon masters who I think are good and being a sort of part of their game. So number one is that while that is happening, rule. This one I put it first because it's super important. So you kind of picture the scene. Your players are playing in the campaign. They've been on the road for many days. They've been camping out in the wild, and they finally come to the town. The first town they've seen in a few days. One of the players is super in it, has maybe had too many coffees that day, and he says, right, okay, so as soon as we get into the town, I want to go to the tavern, I want to buy a drink, then I want to go to the magic item shop. I've got 200 gold I need to spend, and I need to go and talk to the town mayor, and we're going to see what jobs are available, see if there's any quests that need doing. And I've been in a game where this has happened, and the dungeon master said, okay, well, you're all in the magic item shop. And I was like, hang on, like, as far as we know, our characters are still outside the town. This one person who's doing all the talking has said they're going everywhere, so the dungeon master shouldn't automatically assume that all the other players are going to be doing exactly the same thing. So in that scenario, where one player is kind of overtaking the conversation, what do you do? And this is where the while that's happening rule. So the one person goes, okay, I'm going to go to the tavern, I'm going to go to the magic item shop, I'm going to do this. So what you do as the DM is you go, okay, this is what you describe the tavern, you take the player to the tavern, they do the bits in there. Before they have a chance to move on to the next thing, you say to your group, okay, while this is happening, player 2, is there anything you'd like to do? Player 3, is there anything you'd like to do? Player 4, is there anything you'd like to do? So ask the players, while that is happening, what are they doing? It's the same in a dungeon. If you've got one person who's like, okay, I'm going to be doing my perception checks, I'm going to be listening to the door, because we think there might be some goblins further down there setting up some traps, so I'm going to be listening at the door, and I'm going to be going through my pack to make sure I've got magic items, and I'm going to be loading up my crossbow, and I'm going to open the door and ready for anyone to go and fire. Okay, while that's happening, player 2, you've been quiet, what is your character doing? So you're kind of almost pausing the narrative to give everyone a chance to do their thing, and then you resume. While that's happening, it's a fantastic rule, and it works really, really well for the players who aren't the most vocal people and aren't always the first one to shout up. Number 2 is make your characters' backgrounds important. Some DMs run campaigns, and this is the way it goes, where they've got everything planned out in advance, and often I do this too, so you know the nations of the world, you know the cataclysmic event, you know who the main bad guys are going to be, you know the overall main story arc, but let your characters fill in the rest of it. Okay, make their backgrounds important. If your characters are all a bunch of criminals, rogues, peasants, they're all from a kind of lowly sort of background, there's no point starting the game in a castle with lords and nobles and members of the palace guard and the kind of things that the characters wouldn't necessarily engage with. Like, let the campaign start from a position where your characters would naturally be in. If your characters have got different backgrounds, so for example, one of them may be an acolyte, one of them may be a noble, one of them may be a farmer who became an adventurer, give them a reason for characters from these different backgrounds to come together and make the backgrounds important. So when you're creating a character in D&D, you have your background, let them make a custom one. You've got all of the different background choices. There's loads of them. Actually make note of these before your campaign. Like, you can do this in your session 0, you can do this if you get your players to make the characters in advance. When you know your players' backgrounds, what I like to do is I like to actually give them advantage sometimes. So I think the example I've used in a previous video was we had a character who had a noble background, so the character was like a kind of failed member of the Queen's elite guard, or they tried to become a member of the Queen's elite guard, so only characters from the most kind of noble backgrounds could be in that position anyway within that game world. So they saw in the distance while they're out in the wilderness a sort of column of soldiers moving up one of the main roads towards them. And they needed to know whether these were people who were friendly or whether these were potentially hostile. Did they want to march up and introduce themselves, or did they want to go off of the main roads into the forest and use the stealth tactics and avoid this army entirely? So the character did a history check to look at the emblems and the heraldry on their flags, the colour of their robes, the markings on their carts and their animals. The character had the noble history, so I gave them advantage on the roll. You're going to do a history check specifically to see if you recognise the heraldry. Do you know which families these are from? Is this your noble house? Is this a different noble house? Give the player advantage. So, likewise, if you're in a city and the character wants to know which bar, you want to go to a tavern to lie low for a little while. Your characters have been doing something a little bit naughty. They have to escape the city guards. They need somewhere to go and lie low. If you have a character with like an orphan kind of background, or a character who was a beggar, or maybe one of your characters comes from like the kind of the lower part, like the underbelly of the city where the dodgy dealings and things happen. When that character is trying to do a role to find somewhere suitable, give them advantage on that role. Or maybe it doesn't even have to be a role. Maybe because your character grew up in this area, you know a place already. Like you already know where to go. You've been in this situation before. A character who's a cleric who belongs to a particular temple, like they're an acolyte of a particular temple. They can go back to their temple. They know people there. They know people who will help them. Same with wizards or sorcerers if they belong to an arcane college or an arcane university. If you meet other wizards or other people on the road, chances are they recognise each other. We had a character who belonged to like the arcane university, which was kind of away from the area the game was taking place in. But we met some other researchers, instant recognize. They recognise that person, whereas that could have been almost a hostile encounter. So if you imagine you're in the middle of nowhere and there are some wizards from researching some natural phenomena, and they come across a bunch of mercenaries, they may be afraid. They might think these are bandits trying to steal our stuff. They may be quite hostile to the party. But if you have a party member who was a member of that university or that college, then perhaps that encounter is different because those people now are curious. Maybe they know each other. Maybe you need some sort of role to see how well they knew each other. Did your character make a good impression on these people on the few occasions in the past where you've met? Give me a persuasion roll with advantage. Let's see what the kind of feeling of this group is towards your party. If you have a character who wants to be a bit of a lone wolf or a bit of an enigma or a bit of an edgelord, and they don't want anyone to know them, their character just wandered in through the mist one day and they've got they're like haunted or no one knows where they're from. If that player enjoys that, never bring it up. Maybe people question, they're like, so exactly where did you say you came from again? And then if the character wants to roll a deception to pretend they're from somewhere they aren't, or pretend they're part of an organisation they're not, give them that advantage because it suits the background. Number 3, know your character's skills. So take a snapshot, if you can, of your party. Get an idea of what characters can do what. You could have, for example, maybe you've got one person who's got proficiency in survival and the rest have not. So if most of your game takes place in a city, chances are that survival role is not going to come up very often. If you have your one ranger, for example, or even just a druid or a character who just happens to have proficiency in that type of role, they can do something the rest of the party cannot. See, obviously you wouldn't throw this in all the time, but if your game mostly takes place in a city, maybe have an environment in that city, like a park or an open space or something. Maybe they have to go outside the city to meet somebody in the woods nearby, or maybe they have to move from one city to another, or maybe there's some kind of like something they need to cross, like the remains of an earthquake, or there's a river has broke its banks and you have to find a way across. Put that opportunity in for that one character to do the thing their character is good at. Now, with a bigger group, this is harder, obviously. The more people you've got, the more stuff you've got to remember. So it does work better with a smaller group. But, kind of have a think that maybe if you've got a rogue in the party, just throw the odd locked door in there. Throw the odd locked chest in there. Don't do it all the time, because your rogue is not just a lock picking machine. But every now and again, it's like, your characters are going through the dungeon, or they're going through the noble's house to try and steal something. You come across that one locked room. Your rogue goes, "Oh yeah, I've got proficiency in this. I get advantage in this because of my this, that, and the other." Give them the opportunity to do that role. The same goes when you sort of varying your challenges based on character skills for combat as well. So, you may have some characters who can do things like your hold person, and characters who can do kind of mind affecting spells, which are very good against people and not monsters. If you've taken hold person, or your character, that character is very good at persuading people. Don't make them fight giant spiders all the time. Occasionally throw in the kind of enemy that they'd be good at defeating. The same goes for the characters who are really good at fighting wizards, or if you've got a character who's amazingly good at ranged combat, and you play everything on a really cramped up little the virtual tabletop where they haven't got the chance to use that range, that advantage of range they've got, you should give them that chance. I mean, we had a warlock in my game. Warlock was a spell sniper who could send like a 300-foot eldritch blast, which is incredibly far. It's too far to actually display on a sort of normal virtual tabletop. If you're just going in feet, it'd have to be huge. So in those situations, if your characters are good at perception, maybe before the fight kicks off, give that character a chance to throw a couple of these long distance things out, just because it's cool to use your skills. In the same way, have a look at what skills your characters get from their subclasses, because some of these things are super situational and may never come up. I mean, an example is the Horizon Walker Ranger. They have a thing where they can detect portals from extra planar portals and things. It would be quite sad if you picked that subclass and it never came up. As a DM, you can throw like a demonic encounter in. Maybe some of the evil wizards from the evil noble houses have used a portal to summon some demons. All of a sudden, this character is now aware of something the rest of the party aren't, and it gives them their cool moment because they get to use their skills. I was in a game once recently as a player. I'm a little bit of an optimizer, I guess. And I had a cleric character who was just a blaster cleric, just very good at throwing damage spells out. Because at the party, I was told the party lacked a good healer and they lacked a sort of decent a good damage dealer. So I thought I can fill that niche as part of the group. I joined the game late, by the way. They'd already had a few sessions before I joined them. I think in 6 sessions, my character got to use could cast Fireball, and I got to use it once, because there was just no combat. It was all it was a very talky campaign, and I like the talky game stuff, but I was told the party was lacking damage dealing, and so I built a damage dealer character, and the DM didn't give me a chance to use those abilities. And what happened? I left the game just because there was nothing for my character to do. Like, if I'd been told in advance it's a very it's a combat light game, this isn't going to come up very often, I wouldn't have built that kind of character. So also as well, as a DM, when your players are building characters, if you've got a thing in mind, like it's going to be this kind of campaign, just let your players know. Number 4 is allow more than one way to solve a problem. See, using the locked door example, okay, you put a locked door in for your rogue. You've got one character who can use locksmithing in the party. They have to get to the end of this dungeon. There is one big locked door. Okay, the rogue may not pass the roll. You'd hope they would, but maybe the rogue rolls a 2 and a 3 and they get a really low score, and I'm afraid your lockpicking skills did not work this once. The lock is too rusted, your lockpick snaps and gets caught inside and you can't jimmy it out with a different one. If you as a DM think there is only one way to get through this door, then you're not DMing correctly, because your players are going to come up with things you did not think of. Your job is to as a dungeon master, is to put the obstacles in place and put the challenges and the problems in place, and your players are the ones who come up with the solutions. So if your player says, okay, we can't open the door with the lockpicks, but I'm going to cast my heat metal on the hinges and to make the hinges swell up, and then the paladin is going to give the door a big kick to kick it off of the hinges, cool, let them do that. Like, if you've set up a big heavy combat encounter and your characters decide to roll a load of persuasions instead, and they want to talk their way out of it, if that's what they want to do, if that's the consensus among the group, then let them do it. If you find one player is kind of not engaging at all, maybe you have to do the opposite, and there is only one way to solve the problem, and player C needs to do their thing. Obviously they don't have to, you can't force them, but if the other players if the other players want to do all the rolls, okay, let's say we have this locked door, we can't unlock it, we can't break it off the hinges because it's too tough, but there are some arcane symbols written around the top of the door. Maybe the other people are going to roll some perceptions, they're going to roll some investigation checks, and you have the one player playing the warlock who's being pretty quiet in the corner. So, okay, everyone else is rolling investigation, they're rolling perception. They're all high enough to find out that these are arcane glyphs around the side, and a particular magical words need to be spoken at a certain time. It's in a particular language. If you know, you get to learn your character's languages. Maybe the warlock knows Infernal and the rest of the party don't. And the party, with their investigation checks, find out that these arcane glyphs are in Infernal, and they need not only someone who speaks Infernal, but someone who can cast magic naturally. It means that only the warlock can actually get them through this door and get them through this obstacle. And so that player kind of has to be engaged because they're the ones who help the party out, and then the party think it's cool that they have this person. So value the diversity in your group, the kind of diversity of skills and things. Number 5, look for the signs of boredom. Are your players looking away? Are they on their phones? Are you playing over the internet and someone's quite clearly got World of Warcraft open on the other screen and they're looking at that and clicking around instead? You cannot force people to pay attention to your game. If you are trying to force them to do things, they are going to switch off so quickly. If you're noticing that players are just not paying attention, maybe it's something you're doing wrong. Like, are your puzzles too complicated and players are switching off? Like, well, that goes back to the previous one, more than one way to solve a problem. But if your players are reaching a point of impasse and boredom, the next cool thing someone suggests is the answer to the puzzle. Like, make it that way. And or just take the next thing they say. Yep, you hear the click of the mechanism and the door opens and everything's fine. Like, if something is dragging on, don't make it drag on even more. Like, just don't. I mean, we had a scenario I was playing in a game where we were trying to persuade somebody to give us passage on a ship. I think we had to go to this island of pirates, and everyone's rolls were terrible. Like, we couldn't persuade this pirate. We didn't have enough gold to give him the money. You know, we needed to get this pirate ship. There was too many pirates, so we couldn't fight them. It's like, okay, so we can't fight our way to this island because the DM won't let us because the enemies are just too numerous. Our characters are too low level. We'll never survive. All of our attempts at persuasion and deception are failing. We can't talk our way into this ship. We can't buy our way onto this ship. So what the fuck do you want us to do? Like, you know, that entire session was pretty much ruined. And the DM, I don't know what the DM was thinking. Like, you clearly want us to go to this pirate island. You have clearly prepared some adventures on this pirate island. So, like, let us get there. I just don't understand that. I don't understand why the person made it so difficult. Like, what did they want us to do? Like, what, you know, was there some, they'd written in their notes, okay, maybe they have to do an arm wrestle to prove their strength with one of the other pirates. But we didn't. Don't put specific things in that your players are not going to want to understand. Like, if they look like they're getting bored, like, change up what you're doing. And yes, sometimes it's hard to know when people are being bored because people can hide it well. Unless people are very vocal or very physical, you don't always know if someone is switching off. But it's the things like if people are looking at the phones, if people are doodling, and yes, sometimes you can doodle and pay attention as well. But if people are doodling and not paying attention, you know, are people going for break too often? Are people chatting about other things? You know, are two of your, if you're dealing with a complex situation with one player and your other 4 players are chatting about what they did at work or chatting about what they're doing tomorrow, or clearly they're not engaged. So break the rules, change your own situation. Like, has your combat been going on for way too long? Did you know, have you got a monster with 500 hit points and your players are doing 20 damage a turn, and you know, in 12 turns this fight will be over? Have you developed a boss fight which you thought you were doing some Final Fantasy level shit, and it's got a phase 1 and then a phase 2 and then a phase 3 and then a phase 4? Like, is your campaign scheduled to end at 10 p.m. and it's now 11 p.m. and you're still in the same fight? Just stop it. Just stop the fight. Like, the next cool thing your players do, like, your player's got his last 3rd level spell and he does his last lightning bolt. Let's hope for the best. Just let it kill the monster. Like, just describe it, and the lightning bolt rattles around inside of its head and it's about to bring its axe up one more time, and then its eyes glaze over and it just falls backwards and dies. Like, do something like that. End the situation. Like, if your players are not interested, end it. Do something else. Like, mix it up. It's not a failing on you as a DM, because every group is different. You could have the same campaign and you could run it for 2 different groups and it could go 2 completely different ways, and that is fine, because D&D is a collaborative game. Your story is not more important than your players' experience of the game. Like, it's collaborative. Like, if you can't let go of your own plans to change them, then you shouldn't be a DM. You should write a fucking novel. And we've all heard that one before. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed those tips on how to engage your players in D&D a little bit better. I've been Dread Roberts. I've been rambling on, and I'll catch you next time.